sponsored by Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, Botanical Company, Detroit Nutrient Company, ProGreenMI.com, Talking 420 promos, including Culture Clothing.
The wrong one, but Rick recovered.
I was surprised when I saw it flipping on the screen. I'm like, no.
Reverse order day, no problem. We'll just hit the intro right now. All right, so we got through it, even though it was not in the correct order of things.
We have fun.
So, and starting off today, Rick Thompson, Mr. Hashbash, myself, Jamie. We got other people that are going to be coming on, including later in the show, Jimmie Wilson, which I'm kind of excited about. He's like the sensible voice on the Ypsilanti Township Board. A lot of us were there dealing with Judy Pontius and other issues throughout the years. And they have kind of like, there's a woman supervisor who's been there forever causing problems, but they have kind of like their version of an old boys network there. And he began kind of going against the grain a little bit. Now he's running for that district's State House representative spot. And there's some other stuff concerning Ypsilanti we want to get to, too. There's an ordinance, an initiative that has a particular approach. And let's talk about that as well. And it's good that he's around so we can cover some of these issues. And we'll hear what he thinks about this other stuff, too, that we're going to be getting into. There was a few events that took place recently. Just kind of want to recap those a little bit. I know that, well, actually, I might as well throw in a third since Rick did attend at Grow Green, a kind of a hemp demonstration in which hempcrete was made and things were constructed and people got to participate and learn about all that process and everything. So that's pretty cool. And that went on this weekend. So did Reggae on the River, which I attended and helped to work with Glenn. And then there was like a weekend camp style kind of a festival with a lot of great bands and cannabis and so forth on the southwest corner of the state in Jones, Michigan, called Cashmere, put on by Big Cloud. Is that right?
Adam was there.
Big Cloud Farms.
And Adam was there. Yeah.
Cashmere Clouds was the event.
So I think a lot of people went to that. I think that seemed to have been the draw of the weekend, and a lot of stuff went down. Would you give us a recap on that, Adam? While you're so fresh in that?
They had a great venue that enables them to have both vendors in tented areas. Each vendor had their own tents if wanted. They had probably 100 vendors out there.
Awesome.
A real nice assortment. You could camp. They had offered camping. They had a tent that they had entertainment in, yoga in the morning. It was pretty cool.
Of course, Latrisha agreeing that it was neat. I know that she was there. And I think Amy was there. I think a lot of people went to that.
Yeah,
who may have gone to Reggae on the River if they would have stayed in town, possibly. But, Latrish could be up here with us having this discussion. So maybe she decides to. And maybe by the time we get to 5512, she might, because I would like to hear some of her thoughts on that. But we'll see how that goes.
Guilt Master Jamie Lowell. Yes.
Go ahead, Adam. I cut you off to give.
Oh, no. It was a classic caregiver event. I mean, it was all kinds of brands that, are caregiver brands. And there was some fire out there. I mean, there was a lot of mids also, but that's the market we're in,
Yeah, well, the mid's cheap. I mean, because that's the compensation for a lot of people.
There were guys selling $500 pounds, buy two, get one free.
That's pretty cheap. I did see a report on a $60 quarter pound from somebody who was on social media. So there was.
But but you have to understand that's because of the market. That's not because of necessarily the quality of the weed. Now it is to some point. But, these guys are taking these $500 pounds, and these are going back to these, cities like Indianapolis and Elkhart and Chicago. And these guys are partnering.
Right on. Yeah.
South Bend.
Yeah,
that makes total sense. Yeah.
These aren't going into what we would think of as the caregiver market. These are leaving the caregiver market.
Not trying to support people taking a risk, but completely understand how that comes together to make sense for a lot of people. Those places where it's still illegal, things are kind of expensive. You can come up.
Right.
Now, is there any follow-up story that we know of, or any conditions post the event of people getting enforced upon unnaturally or targeted a little bit like that in those states when they return?
No, not that. I mean, it's not like it is driving across Nebraska.
Right. No. I check the news wire pretty much every morning, and I haven't seen anything from the South Bend Tribune or anything else to indicate man, with 60 pounds comes across the Michigan border.
It's my understanding that these dispos are nothing but stopping points for out-of-state people, these Southwest Michigan dispos that, most of their customers are coming from out of state.
I think that makes sense, and certainly a
And
lot.
right.
Of it. Yeah,
At all.
And I was there at the Niles, state licensed event. One of them from Flow Productions, same people that did reggae on the river here in Ypsilanti. And I would say 70-80% of the participants at that event were from Indiana. Because I also did the parking thing with Josie and company, and we worked out the deal where we took the proceeds from parking to go toward Glenn, and I was able to talk to people firsthand and see it, for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked. I talked to a bunch of people about where are you coming from?
Here we go. Tommy Tricom says 75%. That's about the range we're talking.
Yep. Well, we can, of course, all of us have experienced High Times Cannabis Cups up here in Clio, right by Flint, where I live. And even in 15, 16, 17, we were seeing a huge amount of people from Indiana, Ohio license plates coming up in order to enjoy our events. And we really encourage that. I mean, that's what reciprocity is all about. Oh, yeah. Allowing people who have medical cards from other states to come and use our medical system, and allowing people who are 21 and over to come to Michigan and enjoy the fruits of our legalized program.
When we went down to D.C., I think it was 5 or 6 or 7 years ago now. I don't remember what it was. It was it was when Rick did a presentation for everybody, and he's in there on the lineup with D'Angelo and the guy from Israel,
Rafi Meshulam. Yes.
Meshulam, and he's on that list doing a presentation for everybody. I was there with a couple other people getting what's called the Trailblazer Award for Michigan. But my point is, there were people who we came across on there who sought us out because they had been to Michigan coming from DC a few times to get their cannabis. Checked out the lay of the land and kind of got an idea of who was who and what was going on there and stuff like that. And so we were able to attend a NORML meeting while we were there and kind of get into the activist side and away from the corporate side for a while we were there, which was pretty cool.
That's got to be 16 or 17, Jamie, something in that area.
15, 16 is what I.
You lost your driver's license while you were in DC and had to use your medical marijuana card at the airport in order to get on the plane.
The federal agents at the airport liked the fact that it was a state-sanctioned card, that it was actually a registry that was managed by the state and issued by the state, and that meant more to them than anything else I had.
Well, even though it didn't have a photo. Even though it didn't have a photo.
No.
And now Richard 420, he would tell you, now that it's got a photo, it's good state ID.
Yeah, it is. And that was a crusade for Richard for a long time. It has kind of marginal positive effects, but I'm really happy he was successful ultimately.
Right.
So I guess with Reggae on the River, I thought it was pretty cool. It unfortunately took a chance, as CannaJam took a chance last October. You take a chance in those months on weather. And while it did get up to 60, it was really windy, and it did have a period of rain in the afternoon. It was kind of gloomy. It was pretty cool, but just I don't think it was the right fit for a big draw that day. I think we got lucky with CannaJam last year, to be honest, and I think that helped to bring some more people out that we didn't expect. And go ahead, Rick.
I get a lot of respect for the people from Float Nation. They do a good job. They've got a good track record here in Michigan. But if you're going to title something Reggae on the River, it should be an all music festival. If you're going to have cannabis there, you've got to put that in the title. Oftentimes people will just bypass an event because they look at the subject, reggae. That's not something that they would probably spend money on a ticket towards. But if it was, CannaJam Reggae on the River, damn, you probably sold a lot more tickets. So it's about how you phrase the event, how you structure the marketing for it. And I felt like perhaps the titling might have had a little bit of something to do with them not being successful. I heard nothing but good stories from people that were there. A lot of smiles, a lot of happiness, a lot of friendships rekindled. That's always good.
Yeah, I did some networking there. I saw people I haven't seen for a long time. It was pretty cool. Glenn did pretty well as far as getting word out to people. And then the next day, we had the expungement fair at Wellflower.
Well, another thing that makes a big difference, Adam experienced, is that when you have overnight camping, because you have a 2-day event, you have a lot more people that have buy-in. Folks really want that Saturday, Sunday experience, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday experience. They want to go devote an entire weekend to something, especially if they're going to travel distance. So I felt like, in the past, when we've had caregiver events where there's been overnight camping, we've seen a big uptick in the amount of participation.
Yeah, I want to go on and talk about some stuff that's in the news here in a minute. But Rick, I think it's pretty cool that there was the hemp demonstration at Grow Green. Grow Green's one of our sponsors. Let's give them a little bit of a recognition.
So before we do that, I do want to say hello to Aviva, who is in our comment section here today. Aviva is a wonderful musician who participated in my first experience with Hempcrete way back in, I think, 2014 up at Joe Brown's place, where we built a Hempcrete walls to craft I believe it was a root cellar that we did up there. Aviva and the Flying Penguins. You can find Aviva on YouTube. She's just wonderful. So thanks for tuning in today. And the experience at Grow Green was, of course, great. It was indoors, which is nice to be able to do something construction-wise indoors, too. Plus, with Grow Green, it's pretty much a 420 friendly location too. So if you feel the need, you can always step aside and make something happen. But we combined hemp herds, lime, a little bit of native clay, and water in order to create Hempcrete, and created a doghouse. We tried several different mixes, including using Portland cement and several different types of clays. You could see the difference in them in both the way that we worked them when we got in there with our hands, and to see the difference in how they set up as well. But the beautiful thing about this whole thing is you can mine clay off your property. Here in Michigan, we've got a ton of property that's got a lot of clay on it, right? You can grow hemp herds on your yard, right? You can obtain lime commercially. It's easy. And water, of course, is super simple. So essentially, you are the master of your own domain when it comes to Hempcrete. You can build as much or whatever.
Buy a big ass 3D printer and put that shit in there and whip up a few dog houses.
Talk to the guy about that too. I talked to him about that as well, and he said that's on the horizon. But because Hempcrete is got a lot of herds in it, and it's got texture to it beyond what normal cement would, it's probably going to take some extra stuff. Adam,
that's what I heard.
Yeah. No. So that's what I heard. Oh, dun dun dun. No, so I know even Adam,
you get a lot more than you expect when you watch this
grimace and in that one. Adam's usually tolerant of bad humor.
We have the awesome puns here in this show.
No,
people watch it just for that. Sometimes they don't care about the subject
for the bad puns.
They sit through the boring cannabis politics in order to hear a couple of good puns.
Well, we're pretty good at doing that. We're some punny guys. I will say though that it's fun to get your hands dirty, to get into the Hempcrete, to talk about the possibility of all the different things that we could do with this in the future. And then also to get kind of brought back down to earth. We had some folks there that really had some expectations about Hempcrete, and they were told by our experts about the non-load-bearing weight of current Hempcrete and how the science hasn't really caught up yet to the point where we can build gigantic structures out of it. So there were some people there who had expectations that learned the science of it, and therefore a little bit more educated when they left. The question from Shredder 0911 is, do they separate the fiber from the herd? We certainly do. There's a machine called a decorticator, which is about a $1.2 million machine, and that would separate the herd, which is the interior of the stalk, from the fibrous portion, which is the exterior of the stalk itself.
Sounds like the modern cotton gin.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that that's true. I wouldn't be surprised at all to know that's true. But in this particular instance, the hemp that we used was Michigan farmed hemp, which had been originally harvested for CBD. And the stalks had been reclaimed, and then they had been manually had the herd stripped out of them. So you can do it that way, old school, but the decorticator is by far the fastest way. So, and it's the wave of the future. We may not have the infrastructure yet, but hempcrete's pretty amazing stuff.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was even other stuff going around the state this weekend. Those are the 3 ones I know of, and the ones that we all participated in. And that sounded like it was a pretty awesome experience.
Yeah, it was great. There's maybe 15 people there, 4 or 5 of us getting our hands dirty in there, everyone learning from the experience. And the doghouse was just fun to make.
Right on. All good. And a lot more of that to come. Of course, we'll continue to have a few of our setbacks along the way, but let's celebrate the cool stuff as it happens.
Yeah, the hemp industry deserves better than what it's getting right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there is an event coming up. I'm not really participating in or paying that much attention to it, but a lot of really good people are involved in it, and I think that's May 20th, 21st.
The iHemp Expo at the Lansing Center.
Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be an OG panel that's going to have Adam, Mr. Hashbash, and Richard Clement, Free the Weed, and Dr. Detroit, Mike Whitty himself. That's a pretty good OG panel. So it looks like Trisha's going to join us in a little bit. I want to bring up this, and I assume people saw this. I don't have it right in front of me for more details, but it's kind of more what was going on that's of interest to me. There's a guy in Detroit who put a cannabis vending machine on the side of his house.
Yeah.
And just let it, run and do its thing. Probably, picked up the money and reloaded it.
$2,000 a day.
$2,000 a day.
Yeah, for $2,000 a day, and so there's a lot of things to say about that. One is, go ahead.
He was also selling pills. He wasn't just selling cannabis.
Yeah.
Were they in the vending machine?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So that puts a little bit of a twist on the story as far as I'm concerned. Although in the big war on drugs scheme of things, maybe not so much. I kind of still wish they would have handled it differently. But there's. Go ahead.
When you say you wish they would have handled it differently, do you mean that law enforcement wouldn't have come down on this guy? Or down on him?
Well, it turned into a big federal investigation and shit.
Well,
probably because of the pills. Yeah, I didn't know that.
No.
Until right now.
The pills.
Okay, what we got? Let's hear some background on it. What I would have liked is if they just would have knocked on his door and told him, "Hey, it's obvious that you're doing this. Would you cut it out?" So that would have been my druthers without having much more information.
I'm all for the vending machine. All right, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
This cat was supposedly selling drugs to children, also selling guns in the neighborhood, and selling guns to children was the complaint, and that's how the ATF got involved.
I cannot condone that behavior at all.
The story kind of lacked that detail at one point.
Right.
Yeah.
At which point they went and looked at this. They literally went and sat in front of this guy's house and said, "Holy shit, he's got a fucking vending machine." And they went and bought out of the vending machine
twice. Yeah.
Right. A month apart. And, I guarantee you watch this thing for a long time. Trust me, these guys got a case.
Well, no investigation is that quick. I know that.
And then when they raid his house, they find a bunch of guns. Not just a pistol.
18.
Right. So,
and he's a felon. Okay, so he admitted in the article that he already knows he's not allowed to own guns, but he likes them. So
he claims that he bought most of these guns. He bought all these guns on the street. He can't walk in and buy a gun anywhere.
Yeah,
so
he can't.
He says he bought all these guns on the street, and an article I read, he talked a lot, and he, like I said, they announced he claimed he made $2,000 a day, and
All right,
I don't have a problem with the vending machine.
In a hypothetical world, let's say that all that other stuff isn't going on. He's not selling guns to fucking kids or putting prescription pills in the vending machine. I was kind of like appreciative of the fact that he was creating such access like that.
Yeah.
And that if somebody really cared about making him stop, that they do it without a huge fucking investigation. There's other factors here I didn't know and wasn't.
Well, there wouldn't be a federal case. There'd be no DEA or ATF
if it wasn't for the guns. Yeah.
If it wasn't for the guns.
So Leslie's asking, did we know of any issue, any kid taking a gun and doing something with it in which somebody got hurt? Is there any pills that got out that hurt anybody that we know of?
Who knows?
Yeah,
but none that we know of. I mean, we know that the possibilities out there for sure, right, but there is no reports that we know of it hurting somebody at this point.
But that's listen. The ATF and DEA, they need to justify their existence. So how do they do that?
Yeah,
they find a case that they know they're going to be able to make, and they make the case. And
well, this guy kind of made it pretty easy for them. Part of the story, even if it was just a cannabis vending machine, I was going to.
If it was a vending machine, they wouldn't have been there.
That will make a fantastic HBO miniseries, just video of the cannabis vending machine and all the crazy individuals that come up to it and all the stuff that happens around it and the arguments that get in there and
So is
420, by the way.
That would be funny.
Happy 420.
We're all 420.
Many.
What a coincidence.
To touch on that thing, on that subject, many moons ago, my father was friends with Moon Mullins, who was the corrupt helicopter pilot for the Detroit Police Department. And my dad used to get rides up and they'd fly around the city together. And one day my dad pointed out that you could see all the crack houses after the snow fell because there was a beaten path to the side door or, for all these, the whole neighborhood would be completely covered in snow except these 3 houses.
Because the crackheads will do anything to get their fix.
Right. And every weather, it was wild, he said. And it's like if they wanted to bust them, they could. They're there. They're obvious. But,
So we don't need to get into the deep story right now, but since you brought it up, can you give the headlines of what made the helicopter pilot corrupt or what was
it was about hiding the logs and where people were flying and who was flying where, and
it doesn't surprise me at all when you say
some of those people are now involved in the cannabis movement. So
knowing the city, just knowing how kind of things generally have gone, it doesn't surprise me at all that there was shenanigans about getting transportation for certain people and
the helicopter hauling Kwame's mistress around to try to keep away from Mrs. Kilpatrick, right?
Kwame never saw this. Yeah. Kwame didn't see this helicopter as a child. This was Coleman Young. This goes back to the era of Coleman Young and his helicopter pilots, and
Well, so that's a very interesting story of the helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
There's a great discussion here in Flint about the helicopter that we have here for the Flint Police Department. They rented it for a couple of months, then they put out a report, and then they've decided to renew the contract because they found it was valuable. Even now, I mean, literally decades after the story that you're talking about, Adam, literally decades, it's still not always a commonly used tool.
No,
helicopters and police.
It's expensive, man.
They're expensive. It's over $1 million a year to keep one in the air.
Yeah.
I actually follow a couple California news stations who put helicopters in the air who only follow police chases in the LA area. And it's big business. They put it out on like a pay-per-view cable channel type setup. And it's very popular. A lot of stolen cars out there and a lot of police chases. And it's amazing how expensive, and they talk about it all the time, how expensive it is, how much fuel they burn up. And this is just to keep a news copter up in the air, all day, shooting news, covering, doing work. It's not like they're just flying around.
Those are some very compelling videos, though, Adam. We've seen these before where the helicopter's following the perp as they run through roadblocks, or they artfully avoid police in different ways, or they inevitably go.
The OJ slow speed chase.
I've seen some
White Bronco. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I've seen some hysterical chases. Things that you never thought you would see. Guys jumping out of one car and back into the car, guys jumping into other cars, guys running away. How the police missed them, you'd never know. It's like the helicopter's right above them, and there's no communication because the police helicopter's not there yet. You're looking at a news helicopter shooting this, and there's no communication. It's just really funny.
You start being a little bit more intellectual and thoughtful now that
Latrisha's broadcasting from France. Welcome.
Hi.
I suppose.
Welcome to the field.
Yes.
These are the ones that have to bring in size during the winter.
No.
And I'm glad that Trisha's joined us because we're going to get into this 5512 discussion, and I know that she spent a lot of time on that issue, and hopefully still will. We kind of fucked a little bit here recently, and that's what we're going to talk about. But we've got a couple more moves. We're not going to be too hopeful because our best chance is already kind of past us as far as stopping this thing. But you never know, and to continue to be on record and let people know our position is still important. So,
correct.
And what I refer to, I guess, might as well transition into that, is House Bill 5512, the bill that we've talked about quite a bit on this show, which would change the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act so that it defers to the older 1961 Judiciary Act, so that judges can have more control over what happens with a medical marijuana patient if they happen to come into the specialty volunteer courts. And it passed overwhelmingly. It requires a supermajority, 75% vote, and it got that and more. I want to say it was 87-16 with like 4 or 5 reps that weren't there to vote, something like that.
Right.
And some of those people who voted in support of it seem to be solid no's. I mean, this is another one that many of us, I know Trish, myself, I know Rick was on some calls, spoke to people about this and tried to offer information for them to consider when making this decision, and pointed out why all this law change and all this stuff is really not that necessary in order to accommodate the issue here. And if we were to just respect current law, give people the ability, the respect of having been through the state recognized process and participating in this program without any issue, that they shouldn't be discriminated against simply for being a medical marijuana patient if they want to take advantage of one of these courts. And these courts oftentimes are the difference between harsh charges and many, many, many years of imprisonment. So while it's called volunteer, there's a level of coercion there that's, probably should be included to give better perspective. And so, as it is now, the judges just can't conceive of that. Like, of course, it's up to us. And if they are going to be using their cannabis, then, they can choose the other side. That's up to them. This is volunteer. That's one of the things that has apparently convinced some people that it's okay to support this. And then once they're in, they want to use their medicine. And we brought this up before. I'll just explain it again. The judges want to have an extra hearing. And then they want the applicant or the participant to produce their recommending doctor for testimony, which is an obstructionist move. I mean, that's something that's very difficult to do. The doctors don't want to do it. Some that do want to get paid as professional witnesses or some compensation for leaving their practice. And many people aren't in the position to accommodate that. And then if that were to happen, then the judge then makes the decision as to whether or not there was a proper bona fide doctor-patient relationship, and if the condition warrants continued use of the person's medicine, taking on a medical role inappropriately. So these are the things that we've told a lot of the lawmakers. It's made sense to them. I haven't got a return letter from Representative Amos O'Neill from Saginaw, who's awesome. I mean, a lot of these people who are in support of this are awesome lawmakers, typically. So don't want to lose sight of that necessarily, but I am disappointed. And I want to ask them, and I have asked a few, and I asked somebody who was in opposition for us, what they thought. And I've asked some others. I only received one answer, and it was generally about, what is it about what we're saying that's not convincing, or, isn't being considered as much as we would like? What is it about what the judges are saying that is so convincing and makes so much sense to them that they're in support, even late in the game, flipping? And those people who were expected, who outlined the same issues as we did, but why to be in opposition, flipped on that day. I also want to take a moment out, and I did this on my own Facebook page too, to really appreciate those who are in opposition. Many of those people did so in spite of a lot of pressure to support it. Rep. LeGrand originally really liked it. He thought it was a good thing. And that's part of the discussion here too. A lot of the lawmakers were pitched that this was a really good idea. But I still don't, that still doesn't work for me in terms of, we offered up other information that doesn't seem as though it was considered. I mean, some of them didn't even have the conversation with us. You know, and some that did said they were going to oppose, and some that did said they would oppose unless there were amendments. And, you know, just a lot of different things happened when it came time. And I think fundamentally, there's a lot of transactional stuff. We know that we have kind of a corrupt legislature, and we've talked about that a lot. But given the people who are like trying to consider what's the best thing to do, because some of those people are in this discussion for sure.
Right.
I just wonder how much weight simply the judges saying that they want to do this works. I mean, no further consideration, no really thinking it through. Just, I'm not contradicting these guys. That's credible enough for me. They say they want it. You know, I'm going to be in support of it. The one response I got when I was asking about that said, just put it this way, a lot of people don't want to work against those judges.
That's what I heard too.
I also heard from people that, well, these courts are voluntary, and if you don't want to be subject to this this restriction, then you don't have to participate in the voluntary court. But as Jamie mentioned, it's less voluntary than it seems, because then oftentimes this is the only pathway to avoid prison. And I mean, the system makes it very harsh if you don't accept their particular offers.
And that position also embraces the acceptance of being discriminatory against medical marijuana patients.
Right, right.
I'm also finding that they're also working on expanding. And what I mean by that is there is a bill, and I've been sitting here trying to look for it, that is coming through. And once I figure that out, I'll give you all the details on it. But this bill in particular, here it is, says, except for parole granted described under section 42(2) and 3, subject to this section, a term of parole may be reduced by 45 days or every 6 months, and a qualified parolee comes with the requirements of a medicated assistant program for the treatment of an alcohol use disorder or opioid use disorder approved by the department. So to me, it looks like they're trying to sweeten the deal to get more people to come in too. Because a lot of people won't go. The drug treatment, this treatment program is, everybody knows it's a nightmare. Everybody I've talked to, I mean, you'll see a lot of like love stories online because of course that's what people want to see. But as far as, you know, verbally communicating, surveying, speaking to people about this, it's not being utilized as much as it should be. So it looks to me now they're creating bills that, you know, if you do this, then you get an extra 45 days off. And why would they want them to do that? Because they need to have people in those drug courts for them to keep on going at this point. But it's way deeper than that. Yeah. There's a lot more going on with this at the federal level.
I'd like to hear the deeper conversation on that, because this is weird enough that, you know, something is there that's more than what they're saying, what's readily. No, the other one was the fear of losing federal funding. Right. Representative Breen said that, and I said I was pretty sure it wasn't true as we were having the conversation, although I didn't have much to back it up at that moment, and just said, would you just agree that we'll research this, and that if it's not true that federal funds are threatened, that, you know,
Kelly's office told us straight to our face that's what it was. We went to her office.
That's the main person who introduced it.
Mm-hmm. But that's why we went to her.
It took about 5 or 10 minutes to figure out that the position of the agencies that, you know, that put out the main grants that get used by the states for this stuff, make it clear that, and you know, I'm pretty sure it was last week that Trish went into a little bit more detail with some research that you had done on some of this stuff. But essentially, as long as the funds aren't used to support the use of it, that doesn't interfere with getting the grants. So simply allowing people to, you know, to use the medicine, you know, that's working for them. And of course, the judges kept on saying shit like they're trying to gain on the system. You know, it's just accepted to a lot of people that somebody using cannabis, you know, they might get their card and it might have been a sham. And so now we have to have this law to stop that. Instead of, we have a state recognized process that determines when it can happen. And if somebody does that, let it, no matter what you think or whatever, let it go with that. That's, you know, that's the law. That's the process. This is all being done to circumvent that. And of course, you know, this concept of the immunity that the patient has, and that they should be able to use their medicine, even if caught up in the criminal justice system, you know, was first confirmed in the higher court opinion in TUI. And we know that, you know, a push to do this comes shortly after that. And, you know, that's part of the end around game. So there are a few things going on here. None of them equal somebody who really thinks this through should be in support. I mean, Representative Bolden, she's running for a Supreme Court decision. She supported this. I'd like to find out why she supported it.
You see all that? I sent it to you. So I went into the Michigan, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically the chapter of the government where they have to start, I guess it's like a quarterly meeting. They have different departments within the judicial branch. Anyway, I had found, if I didn't send it to you, I'll look for them and find them, that this was, I mean, they've been talking about this for a year. Judge Hoffman has, with other judges, already voted on this. Like, they already knew they were going for this a while ago. It seems to me like they were just trying to dumb it down for a while. And then there's also the bills that Mary Whiteford is putting through, right, or she had introduced, and that was to have the opioid commissionary or something, some type of committee that they're going to put in that is going to overlook and monitor opioid rehabilitation processes and things like that. I think that's the state.
Oh, sure they are.
And right,
yeah,
well,
they use the term harm reduction in that language too.
Do they really?
I know.
Yeah.
And then they said that they are taking that money that they got from that big win from the lawsuit that happened with the opioids or whatever.
Purdue Pharma.
And they're going to allocate those funds. They're not going to actually let people who need them. So if they, like I said before, if there wasn't a problem with what we have currently, then there's no reason for them to create this situation in the first place. So it's just another funnel into the judge's pockets, basically, as far as I'm concerned. And this is probably obviously been something that's going on for a very long time. And will continue as long as we don't know which type of data that comes out of that program. And I know that's a steep hill decline, because this is like I said, a program that has been researched and analyzed and spoke about for years, since the 80s.
I will say this. When I spoke to Richard, he mentioned that he thought the judges had called certain lawmakers the morning of the vote, and that they had made a special appeal to lawmakers to get them to vote yes for the bill. And that harkened back to 2014 on the last day of the legislature, when we were ready to have our caregiver-based medical marijuana business law put forth, the local option bill. And the sheriffs on that particular morning, the Sheriff's Association called a ton of legislators in order to get them to vote no on our particular thing. And they actually ended up withdrawing it. So that particular strategy kind of hit the sore spot with me. It worked then. And has anyone else heard about judges' organizations making some phone calls to lawmakers?
Well, I don't doubt that. I haven't heard that, but I certainly don't doubt that at all. But,
right.
Other than still kind of confirming that it's just because the judges say it, you know, instead of really thinking it through or taking in other information as part of the decision-making process. It's, you know, they had, and it's, you know, speaking of Judge Hoffman, and, you know, the judges who push this, they also hired GCSI, one of the most high-powered lobbying firms in the state, to push this, you know, and they're telling them stuff like, it's currently, like, Brandy, I can't really post it. Brandy put some of a return letter from Representative Pohutsky in the comments. It's kind of too big to put up on the screen here, but in it says current law prevents treatment court, and it says from holding a hearing to hear testimony from a patient's doctor. I don't know what prevents it from doing that in any way, but that hearing that it is mentioned there is totally not necessary in the first place.
Yet they already have the right to. They already have the right to do what that hearing would give them the right to do. So there's no purpose to a hearing.
Yeah,
but
it's all bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors, man. And you know, a lot of smart people fucking fell for it. And a lot of people who are typically our friends. Now I really hope so. Now I think we brought this up before too, but I'll get off track yet related. MCMA's hired a guy named Mark Fisk from a big PR company, big public relations firm. Byron Fisk, Diane Byron, helped out in the medical marijuana campaign years ago. Mark Fisk actually was given a position with MCMA, and he's very, very connected and understands the processes of Lansing. And from what we understand, he's working on Democrats in the Senate to try to secure enough support to run the anti-caregiver type language. I don't know exactly what they'd have to produce new bills over there, but to run whatever anti-caregiver approach that they think that they'll get the most support with over there, and then to take that momentum back into the House. Would like to hope that maybe, since we're getting a little bit dissed on this one, we can, you know, hope to appeal to get just at least the continued support that we already have, you know, against this type of approach in the House, and at least stop this one still. We really probably have to start thinking about this and do some work, though. I mean,
I wrote Jim Ananich at the beginning of this, and I believe that, I have to look that up, but I think that he said he'd be opposed to it. But again, that was a while ago, so you never know. That's a politician, so.
Yeah. He is the Senate minority leader. He's the top Democrat in the Senate.
I bet.
Yeah. He is, and he and the Black Caucus and some other places would be really important to at least have that position. We can stop the supermajority. Again, I think it's going to be hard to turn back the work that's been done with so many resources, and the concept of judges saying they want this versus us. You know, could the lawmakers weigh that in their own way based on how that system works in there. And, you know, this is a really, really formidable challenge.
The caregiver bill was something we've been working against for a while. They had every intention of trying to pass it last year because they didn't want to have to deal with this issue during an election year, which 2022 is. And they were stymied at every turn by our protests and our mothers with their children and our facts, our darn persistent facts about caregivers not being a detriment to the community or the system. And it got stopped, but now it's just been rekindled. Realized that the reason that they had to bring in Mr. Fisk was because their primary lobbying agent, you know, the notorious Steve Linder, has pretty much disappeared off the face of the earth lately because he's facing significant investigation for what appears to be campaign finance related misconduct and how money was raised, how it was distributed, how it was stored, how it was transferred. And this goes far beyond his involvement in the cannabis industry and stretches into his involvement, generally speaking, with the Republican Party and all the myriad things that come along with that, with healthcare, the automotive industry, insurance industry, alcohol, tobacco, so many different players.
And Mr. Chatfield.
Oh, that's right. Yes. And former Lee Chatfield, whose heinous personal history seems to have been revealed. And wow, there seems to be some real concern about how he behaved while he was in office and whether or not, you know, people like Mr. Linder facilitated that.
Yeah.
Man, it's kind of a problem. Though this is probably a good strategy on their end, and they are spending huge money and getting some bigger guns on it.
Oh yeah, no, this didn't, getting rid of Linder didn't help us. Trust me.
No, well, you wanted to target Democrats, then you use a Democratic lobbyist. Right. That's what you do. Yeah. Someone who they're already familiar with, who some people might owe favors to, who's been around for a long time, as you mentioned, and who has some kind of cred amongst the legislators. And we focused primarily on the House of Representatives because that's where we knew we needed to stop this bill. So our lobbying efforts have been targeted at the representatives. Working the senators, that's a field that we've only lightly touched, in my estimation.
It is moving forward, though, and I want to encourage everybody to 5512, the concept of there being anti-caregiver legislation brought up there. All that stuff can be relayed to your state senator, requested.
5301, House Bill 5301. It's actually part of a package, but if you just reference House Bill 5301, the entire package will come up. So that is different than the 5512, which is the drug court bill.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, what's happening in the Senate is they have to come up with if they're going to be successful, they have to introduce some new bills. So those discussions are going on and what that's going to look like. And to mention that process shouldn't even be taking place. Yeah. Those guys, I mean, here, and this is the pitch still is, and it still continues to work, that these people get their caregiver license, but in reality, they set up a huge operation and then they use their house and you know, sell off to anybody and everybody and make $1 million, and you know, and it smells in the neighborhood and it takes away from those who paid for their licenses to do business and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so that stuff's already illegal. And, you know, that can be focused on different ways if they come across those situations or have really good reason to believe that one of those situations are taking place. That there's already methods in place to take care of that. What this actually does is hurt the existing caregiver system, which are the people that are taking care of patients. And they would then be affected by having their rights peeled back from what they're doing at what's necessary to take care of them at the time. So that doesn't make any sense.
Every one of the children enrolled in Michigan's medical marijuana program is required by law to be serviced by a caregiver. So anytime you start messing with caregiver laws, you're absolutely messing with the health and welfare of the state's sickest children, the medical marijuana recipients. Remember, it's a higher standard to get certified for that. It takes 2 physicians. It's a longer, it's a more thorough process. So when you're messing with caregiver laws, you're not just taking away somebody's right to grow 12 plants in their basement for somebody. You're really actually having a real world effect on the health and wellness of people.
Rick, you know, I just was telling, I don't know if I sent it to you either, Jamie, but I ran into, I was looking into some lobbyist stuff the other day because I spent a couple of days here and there down the rabbit hole on different projects. And I had found that in 2020 and 2021, there were a total of 21 lobbyists that lobby for the Michigan Caregivers, or excuse me, the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association. And they were backed by a pretty big law office in Lansing. And they are also one of the largest lobbyist organizations.
Dykma?
Yeah.
Dykma,
they got in on it pretty early.
Yeah, real early.
Got their hands in it, yeah.
Dykma was just subject of a social equity work group with the Cannabis Regulatory Agency about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So they are very much embedded in the regulatory agency.
Shelley Egerton went there directly after leaving, being head of the department.
Yeah,
State Department.
Something we shouldn't let happen. You shouldn't be able to go from leading a department directly into working in the same industry that you just regulated.
Well, Mark Fisk is extremely strong for Democrats, and that was and that's a problem. She is quite formidable herself. She's a part of this organization also, and she works the Republicans very well. And this is going to be tough.
Yeah. I found it. I'm sorry, Trish. I'm just briefly here. I found it interesting that although Steve Linder and Shelley Egerton seem to be co-managing the public relations scheme for Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, she did not take the job that was eventually given to Mr. Fisk. She's technically, to the last my knowledge, employed by Select, which is one of the MCMA members. But
is that Live Well? Same as Live Well? Because I think that's technically who she is employed.
Senator Lincoln.
There you go. So the fact is, it's such a detriment. It's such a stain to have your name associated with the MCMA. Nobody would want their anointed representative to stand at the helm of that organization. You'd have to bring someone in like Byram Fisk, like Fisk, right? Who doesn't have anything to lose. Nobody can boycott him. Nobody can take away retail sales from him. No one can say, I don't like your cannabis. He's the only guy that can come in and actually take the job, because anybody else would be so stained they couldn't work in the industry.
And as soon as you need somebody to hire, as soon as you need to hire someone of that caliber, you're going to call him up anyways.
I ain't shit. He's not. Did you check his website out? He doesn't. I mean, like, yeah, he's got a great developer, and maybe he has the experience in the Democratic Party. But I mean, did you check out how much money he lost for Gretchen Whitmire's donations when he did some PR for her? I guess he forgot something particular you're supposed to have in it, and there was a $2.7 million boo-boo. And he was just like, "Uh-oh, oops."
Yeah, oops.
Yeah.
And, Diane Byram helped out, as I said, in the 2008 campaign for medical. And they're using that too as like, oh, see, our firm has been involved. We're pioneers.
We've been doing this.
Yeah, this kind of stuff. So they have that kind of shit to use too. This is all relationships.
Smoke and mirrors, but they're good at it. That's
They're also trying to claim, with Steve Linder claiming credit for passing the MMFLA in 2016. I'll tell you what, all of the stuff that we hate about the MMFLA, which is, for those listeners that don't know, it is the medical marijuana business licensing program here in Michigan, passed in 2016. We had a great program already written up and ready to go in 2014. And as you heard earlier, they stopped us with the sheriffs. And then in 2016, they passed one that is very inferior. All the things we hate, the overabundant, the over tough testing standards, the ridiculous entry fees, all of the background checks, the continual federal monitoring, all of the hurdles that we all complained about, they were put in place by Linder and his cronies and Clint Kesto and the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they can claim that as a credit, but to the rest of us that are in the know, that's a detriment.
Well,
their involvement.
They got paid. Don't you better.
Ooh, they did.
Yes, they did.
That was a long fight because we were very angry.
It just occurred to me why they were asking the stupid question as to why or when, and I'm talking about 5512, and I'm just remembering the guy from GCSI telling us when we were in this meeting with Judge Hoffman, Rick, you might remember, saying, and according to the law, we can't even bring up that, ask them if they're a medical marijuana patient or not.
That was stupid.
So that was stupid, except for now that response from Pohutsky now seems to make more sense to me, saying, because what they've said is we have to change the law in order to even be able to have enough control over being able to have this discussion with them about whether or not they're a medical marijuana patient, because that's how badly it was twisted. Because what she said was, right now the law doesn't allow for this hearing, and it doesn't have to. And that, that's our point.
Yeah.
All they have to do is decide that they're going to follow existing law and not discriminate against these people from using the courts or from using their medicine once inside the courts.
They spun this so well.
Why do we think that? I mean, I was always under the impression that my medical card could be challenged in court if I presented it, and that the court had the opportunity to bring my doctor in if they wanted to. And I always thought that was something that was going on in the court system. These specialty courts, I would think, if they had reason to challenge your card, could.
That's what I suggested to the judge, and he's like, "Oh, fair enough." But they don't really consider that shit.
Right.
Because what they said is they want to have that extra hearing to understand, the bona fide doctor-patient relationship, and if that's valid, and the condition. And as we both, that's what the circular discussion became.
Right.
And Rick and I were like, the card demonstrates.
Card does that.
Unless you think there was some issue with the card.
And you don't get to make clinical decisions about someone's well-being in a judicial setting. It's, come on. Stupid. It's just.
Why doesn't the state take responsibility for that too, though? I mean, there's the other options. If our state allocates funds for this program in the first place anyway, obviously it has to be available to all. I mean, if it's just as the way I read it, it's no different than a civil court, right? That's what they were created for, is to take the load off of civil courts. So if a person wanted to go through something similar like that, I don't understand why they couldn't just go through the state if it's a federal problem. There is a solution there. It could have been put
many different ways of doing it.
I guess there'd be some fiscal drawbacks on it, but.
So if there is an issue here, I don't mean to cut up, but just I think kind of confirm or support what you're saying. If there is an issue here, there's other ways of having a resolution without doing this.
Absolutely.
But let's not ever discount the fact that judges are used to being the gods in their courtrooms. They're used to being able to decide, you get this, you don't get that, and you get it based on my subjective decision, and I don't have to explain it. And when someone takes away their godlike privileges on a particular issue, they rebel against it. And the fact is, what the TUI decision said was that you no longer get to play God as to whether or not people used medical marijuana while they're within your court system. We've established that that's a right that's allowed. And they want to still be able to say no for whatever reason. You can cite ego. You can cite the complete denial of all addictive substances or all, all substance abuse potential is how they get successfully through drug court. You can argue a million different things, but ego decides what the judges do, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
This was a big play about who's in charge in the courtrooms, and they are going to win. So
they couldn't their intentions might not be as devious as we think. They just really believe they are eligible for this type of control at all times while in that position. And that the judge that we spoke to kept on speaking from that position.
Yeah. Well, I have to be able to. He said, I have to be able to decide. As if the outcome of the drug court or in this instance, veterans court or mental court, whatever, the outcome was based on the circumstance the judge allowed to have along this case, not necessarily the individual person's level of responsibility or commitment to it. So,
Brandy's probably right here.
She says this is a punishment, and that's why so many judges want to be able to control cannabis use. Yep. You give it as a gift, you take it away as a punishment.
They can't conceive of just letting it ride in the new world of what's been now approved by the laws of the people and the processes in the state of Michigan and let that dictate how this could be resolved. And then you don't really have to do anything. And if you want to do something, then codify the high court TUI decision to make it very clear. Yep. That this is the case, but you don't have to do anything other than not discriminate against people who use cannabis medicine. And they were clear about that too, because they used the terms gain on the system, and
I just don't see the harm done by the guys that are gaming on the system as compared to the harm done by the effect on people who are not.
Right.
Again, we shouldn't be making rules that are defined by the single or instance actions of the worst case scenario. We should really be defining these things in ways that benefit the most people. And if there are outliers, then we have other procedures that can take care of that.
I also agree with Spartan here, too.
Yeah. Read it, Jamie, read it.
He says, still stuck in the old mindset and won't accept the fact that all drug use is a health issue, not a criminal one.
Yeah.
Which is true. And we did, for sure pick up on how this judge, the whole bringing in your doctor for testimony is an old school fucking prohibitionist move.
Yeah. And in Oakland County, for our listeners that may not be familiar with our viewers, Oakland County during the early ages of the medical marijuana program was notorious for making medical marijuana patients bring in their physician and go over their medical history in order to decide whether or not the relationship between the person who received the medical marijuana card and the doctor who issued the medical marijuana card, to make sure that relationship was legally compliant. Otherwise, they tried to take your medical marijuana privileges away from you and charge you as if you were a regular drug criminal in some way. So they have a history of that in the state, and that's really what we're afraid of going back to. It's one of the reasons why we're so vehement about this. We've seen the danger that this particular procedure can be. Almost never was it successful. The judges can decide on a whim that you don't have the right components for a bona fide doctor-patient relationship and then take those protections away from you. It's a trap.
Yeah, in 2012, we really did not want the law change to have that included into the act. And that was one of the things that there was what was called the Walsh Bills. And in lame duck at 4:20 in the morning, this package of bills that we thought were not going to pass all passed. They started off being capable of just totally gutting the system. And then the fight was to take it from there to make it to the point where it didn't just totally fuck the system.
Yep. It started with 7 bills, ended up being, I think, 9 or 10 bills at the end of it. And Walsh was the Speaker of the House at that particular time. And they were not positive. They made a tougher standard for establishing the bona fide doctor-patient relationship in order to try and sink a lot of patients.
Yeah, and meanwhile, there already was a process in place to make that determination through the medical, whatever the agency is. I don't know what they're called, but whatever that agency is, then has that power to determine and then sanction the doctor accordingly if they determine that the doctor is not, adhering to those standards.
And we have seen doctors sanctioned in Michigan in the past, primarily for issuing what the state believes is too many medical marijuana certifications. In one instance, they had a physician that they claimed was issuing, several hundred per day based on the annual amount that they put out. But I think that didn't take into consideration that particular physician was running several different clinics in several different places at the time. So, but I don't recall ever seeing someone say, you are disciplined, you physician, you bad man, because you issued a medical marijuana certification and you didn't put a sphygmomanometer on their arm. You didn't listen to their chest. You didn't ask them to do this with their elbow and if it hurts, right? So the state's done really terrible things in the past to medical marijuana patients. It's one of the reasons why we fight so hard now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the people that really suffered a lot during this period has a brand new podcast. We should give it up for Ida Pearl Lee. Ida, roll a joint, smoke a joint with Ida.
Light a joint with Ida.
Light a joint. Well, it was roll it, smoke it, and light it, I guess. So I'm using the extended title, and you're just using a shorter version. But anyway,
and also the actual version.
Yeah, you're using the correct one. That's true. Yes, you're being honest. But Ida, of course, was a mother of a very sick child who was very influential in some of the discussions we had during the years when we really had to defend the Medical Marijuana Act from a lot of things they wanted to do to it to take things away. They wanted to eliminate caregivers completely. On more than one occasion, we had to fight that battle.
Starting in 2009.
Yeah.
Right after passage.
Bella, I mean, there have been just so many brave people in this movement, but Ida really put herself out there and told her story. And
she had Robin on for her first guest, and she wants to, as she was on here talking about it last week.
Yeah, I grabbed that and seen it.
Yeah, she wanted to highlight women. She started off with Robin, who she works with as Robin's the director, Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and Ida's the deputy director of that organization. And I kind of hope that this. I posted this her graphic image on my Instagram, for this show to help promote it a little bit. And it's the one that there's a couple of versions, and the one that says she's going to have Robin on the show. And somebody got in the comments and was bitching about Robin, one way or another. There's this image of her that isn't really her out there,
right?
And people could watch this. I mean, they could watch lots of stuff. Robin's been on Medical Monday. She's been on our show. A lot of people could go see her at. They could probably email her or call her if they wanted to. But and I'm not saying like everybody has to like everything about her. Everything has to be perfect or whatever. But at least not what she is not. And people want to know a little bit more about her background. That interview that Ida just did on Light a Joint with Ida gives you some good idea of.
It was good. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about her and where she was in the movement. That's kind of a cool thing. Like, you guys need to have somebody interview each one of you and get us younger folks out here a little bit more understood.
Are you implying that some of us are older?
No, I'm just saying that I am very young.
She said some of you.
Some of you, yeah.
She might not know,
No, the fact is there's a lot of us came to the cannabis activism for different reasons.
Right.
And, she has a family history of being punished for cannabis. And that drove her to do some things on her own. And then she was our first lobbyist for the Michigan Association of Compassion Centers way back in the day, back in 10 and 11 and 12. And then after that for the National Patients' Rights Association. And then, of course, she represented the Marijuana Policy Project during the time of the legalization bills. And Michigan Cannabis Industry Association ever since. She's been a continuous force in the state. Go ahead, Jamie.
I wasn't going to say anything. Just agreeing with you.
What?
Yeah, no.
Hey, you know what? I guess I'll throw in that the NPRA was pretty pivotal. That was the first industry association, MAC, had gotten some good stuff started a long way, including getting the lobbyists Kevin McKinney, still there today. In fact, Robin and Kevin have the distinction of being the only people that saw that new legislation from start to finish. And they picked up where after MAC dissolved, and there's many reasons for that, but just could no longer support it. They
threw it all in jail, is what they did. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and there were several raids amidst many of the members too. There were this weird decisions and enforcement. McQueen, for example. And anyway, so it fell apart. But we also organizationally didn't really focus in on one thing. We kept on responding to all the different things that were going on, and just
same issue now.
Kind of got all spread thin that way because there's so much going on. And
butter spread over too much bread, right? Yes, exactly.
And so they, so this history is long and it's taken, as we say, thousands of people over decades to move the needle. There's just a little bit more of it since we're kind of appreciating them. I think our guest is coming on. We can ask him what he thinks about some of this stuff too. But want to introduce Jimmie Wilson Jr., who is he's currently on the board of Ypsilanti Township, but is the candidate for the open seat for the new. I'm not sure if it's new, but it's the 32nd district, I believe. And he just left, so I'm sure he'll come right back on, and we'll pick up that intro where I left off.
Be right back. I'm gonna join.
Okay. Hey.
How's it going?
Hey, it's going well. I think I got a little intro out about you. And am I correct? That's a 32nd district. Is that right?
Yes, 32nd district, right.
Is that a new district, or is that similar to what was going on?
It's very similar to what it was before.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned before that currently serving on the board of Ypsilanti Township as a trustee, the title that's used there.
Yes. Yep.
And then running for the open seat of 32nd State House Representative.
Right.
So welcome to the show. And please introduce yourself and let people know what you'd like about that, and then we'll get into a little bit of a discussion.
All right. So, just first off, I want to just say, excuse the background here. I was coming out of another meeting, but I want to make sure I got on here. I've been elected on the Ypsilanti Township Board of Trustees since 2016, and I was reelected in 2020. I'm also on the executive board, elected with UAW, Local 898, trustee there since 2014. And as you know, Jamie, but for the rest of the audience, Ypsi Township has not been on the right side of things when it comes to cannabis. And so I've been one of the few members of the board that has pushed back on that. I think that on a state level, I can be very effective, especially seeing how our current state rep has introduced the wrong language for the cannabis industry. So I plan to be the total opposite of that, to where I'm going to be a supporter of the cannabis industry and for our businesses and for our caregivers. So I plan to take some of that to the state level, and of course, a lot of other issues that need to be addressed as well. So.
Yeah, and you seriously know about that. I just want to point out that it's not like you're just saying that because that's the bias of this show and most of the people that watch it. I remember, and you work with a guy locally, meaning maybe with your campaign for a connection to some of the cannabis issues and things like that. And the guy we both know, Alex, and he's been on this show a few times too because he's got a lot of cool stuff to say. And
yeah, Alex Thomas, yes,
Alex Thomas, and there was one time, I think it was last summer. I mean, or exactly when, I guess I don't remember, but there was some stuff brewing. There were discussions about this is about Ypsi Township based, what to do. I know they like to have they like to be unanimous and a lot of decision making there. The supervisor, kind of likes to have that harmony, on many issues and stuff.
Right.
But it was like a Sunday, and Alex put together a meeting, for us, because you really wanted to learn more about these issues and just had questions about, like, why would they be doing this and what's going on here, and so you could understand it, and you went out of your way, and that wasn't the only source of information that you saw, but the point was you wanted to think these things through,
right,
and have an understanding of what's going on before making a decision on something, and you
right.
did buck the trend. You went against that policy of kind of everybody being on the same page with stuff when it came to these cannabis issues, and pointed out how, no, this could really be helpful. We don't want to shut this out. We don't want to.
Like you said, I was a supporter way before I was going to run for this particular position. So I'm not just doing it because I'm running for office.
No, well, in fact, a couple of us said, hey, that seat's coming up. We need people like you to be in that position. And that wasn't a consideration of yours for a while. It
right.
turned out obviously to be, and things lined up for you to be able to do it, which is great.
Right.
But no, that's true. And of course, a lot of us crossed paths with you and met you and got an idea of where you're coming from too, when showing up to show support for Judith Pontius earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When she was being kind of persecuted, I think is a good word, by the township and the weird local ordinance that's there, and which is really more restrictive than state law. And of course, there were some quirks in the process in terms of not challenging the decision from the new decision from the Court of Appeals. She had a good decision from the Court of Appeals at first. And then there was the DeRuyter decision, which has caused all types of problems on a local level, of course. Mm-hmm. And then that was thrown back to the Court of Appeals, in which they then rendered a shitty decision. And then that was never challenged. That it should have been on that. But that would have been our first shot at it right then. But that was not requested leave for the court. The court left some questions open, and the decision in DeRuyter had to do with actually commercial property and whether or not they could intervene with activity there. And the Supreme Court didn't define a few things. This had to do with somebody who only is a caregiver, only has a few patients, is growing in their own basement, has enough resources to do it. And, we don't think that's what they meant by that ruling. We could have found out right then, but we didn't. But anyway, you kind of understood why she was being supported so much by people, why we thought it was ridiculous. We took issue with the attorney there, along with, probably majority of the board. Mm-hmm. And some people got to talk to you and stuff like that. And, got to know where you're at. And so we want to support people that in general think about issues and want to learn about them before making decisions on them, at large. And certainly those who've come to the conclusion that, cannabis rights ought to be supported and expanded. And we're dealing now, quite a bit in the legislature with big money interests and in some cases judges, trying to hurt what we've achieved over the years instead of moving forward.
And I think that's what it's going to be essential that, when I'm elected, to make sure that, as legislation is presented, that I'm touching base with folks like yourselves to make sure that, to make sure I understand both sides of everything,
I want to bring back, this is Sunshine Daisy. She's also the person who introduced you at Hashtag. And just read to everybody what she said. She says, I attended an Ypsilanti Township meeting and witnessed strong resistance to anything pro-cannabis related by the board. Jimmie was the complete opposite. He was open to the idea and was asking great questions. Thank you, Jimmie. So,
thanks, Sunshine.
So obviously we support that type of position, being in the higher level of decision making, in the governmental structure, and would like to see somebody like you take the place of somebody who, as you mentioned before, would support some of the anti-caregiver package of bills that came in the House earlier. I want to give Representative Peterson some credit. He was one of the ones who opposed recently House Bill 5512, which is a bill we didn't like. So I do appreciate that, but that doesn't solve the issue of being involved with trying to peel back existing rights. And just as a basic litmus test for let me convey to you right now. I mean, I think you've already picked up on it, but to any lawmaker, in my opinion, if it starts peeling back existing rights, it starts getting into unnecessary territory and stuff that is going to get the kind of resistance that we've had to come together and offer when they tried to do it last time. And now that's brewing again. They tried that in the House, and now they're trying to come at it again from kind of the Senate side right now. That's what we're faced with. We'd like to have people in there so that we can be faced with that, a lot less often in the future, and maybe even correct some of the stuff that's going on that we might be faced with this session.
Hey, Jimmie, there's been a kind of a whole bouncing ball of different ballot initiatives that have been going on regarding cannabis in Ypsilanti Township. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where that stands?
Yeah, so to my understanding is that the first ballot initiative didn't get enough valid signatures. It was presented as trying to eliminate any area of the township to allow recreational marijuana businesses. But then I guess there's a second one. It was kind of the complete opposite, where I think it was trying to allow it to be anywhere. But I guess it also didn't get enough signatures. I still don't know who the groups are that were involved. But I think they both were not successful, to my knowledge. But that's just based on what I've kind of get from our attorney at this point. So I don't actually know folks in the community who are maybe involved with it. So
isn't that a kind of a concern, though, that we see oftentimes local ballot initiatives that are fostered by people who don't really have a local connection, that are specifically trying to be raised to generate an advantage for a particular single business or group of businesses?
Right. I think it helps when it comes from that local community. So if you had some folks which kind of like Jamie said, we got Alex Thomas, he knows a lot of folks that are on the right side of this, and it would probably be more effective, and probably you could get something really done. You could actually create the entire ordinance, probably, as you guys have put together a lot of good legislation, including Proposal 1. So yeah, coming from the local community would be key.
And transparency too. I mean, even if it does come from somewhere outside the city, let's find out who's running these things and what the potential is for individuals to benefit. So we don't see the system being utilized as an advanced business tool.
Yeah. Do you know who is involved with those, or no?
The brand new article from MLive today called "Smoke and Mirrors: Ypsilanti Township facing $125,000 dark money campaign over marijuana." Talks about a couple of different groups that are specifically named, and a couple of people. Jason LaRosa, Sam Pernick's name is in here. So there's several other groups. It's kind of outs them to a certain degree, but I think it does leave them with the same situation where they don't have enough qualified signatures. It does say, and those of us that have been involved before, that they were paying between $10 and $26 per signature.
Yeah, I saw that.
Huge.
That's
huge.
$2-3 is a big payday. $5 is an outstanding payday.
It was a big deal when we went up to, like, I want to say $6 or $8, or at times during the campaign. That was like, we really need to get some signatures.
Well, and then to have your signature collectors gather so many signatures that are not valid.
Yeah,
the Ypsilanti thing is a big thing, and to not properly train people to be the difference between the township and the city, or even the surrounding townships and cities. So I guess all these groups have until June to get enough signatures in. I think June something. That might even be incorrect, but I think it's. Does anybody know when the cutoff would be to be on the ballot for November?
May 12th.
I think it's July 11th. I think is the cutoff in November.
Okay, so there's time, especially with resources, to still do that. some of these describe that I'm aware of that, from some of the people that Rick is talking about, want to include things that may not be valid. I mean, I don't know for sure. Some of that stuff may have to be challenged, might have to be, go through that process to determine. But typically in a township, there can't be a pro-initiative ballot, but you can do it with the MTR with the cannabis issue of opting in under the MRTMA, because that's provided for in the MRTMA. And there's a certain way that it does it. Otherwise, you have to be a municipality, a city, or one of the few villages that's incorporated under the Home Rules Act to be able to do that. And what you can do for sure, and again, maybe some stuff has to be challenged and find out, but what you can do for sure is you can opt in and you can say which licenses and how many. And it sounds like some of these approaches want to go well beyond that.
Yeah.
I just don't know if anything beyond that it would works or not.
So we had the ban on recreational marijuana businesses, but that expired on March 31st. And so now we do have a certain location in place where there is no, I think it's an unlimited amount, actually. There's no limit on the number of licenses. But it's kind of in an obscure area of the township, which would be okay for certain types of businesses, your groceries, your research, or your maybe your transporters, things like that. But you're not going to get a dispensary, a provisioning center to be over where it's located, because there's no, like any other business, you want some drive-by traffic, you want, walk-by traffic, it's really an area that's more industrial. So
that's all too common in some places. Go ahead, Rick.
So your moratorium expired then? Was that what it is?
Yeah, moratorium expired March 31st.
Oh, so just recently. That explains why so much activity in the township all of a sudden. I get you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I didn't realize that.
And the zoning ordinance was put in place at the end of February.
So a lot has happened here in 2022 in Ypsilanti Township. How do you find you're planning on holding a much larger office where you'd be responsible for helping to determine laws that affect multiple municipalities? How do you feel scaling up is going to be, going from a municipal office to a representative's office?
Could you explain it? Say that again.
So you're currently in the Ypsilanti Township Council.
Yes. And
you're also running for a state representative position.
Yes.
So, I mean, one of them has one level of responsibility, one has the other. I mean, that's a big obligation. Clearly, you're up for the task. You certainly seem very familiar with all of the subjects that we've talked about today. But, I mean, is that a little daunting? Is it a little frightening maybe? You got a lot of work to do there?
Yeah, I see what you're asking now. No, I would say no, because understanding how local government operates, understanding how county government operates, understanding how all these governmental entities need to operate together, I think is very important, understanding it locally. I've been pretty active on the county level as well. And so taking it up a level to the state level, I think it just kind of really will be an extension of my knowledge. Obviously, it's a larger scale, like you said, and a lot more issues are going on. But I think having that foundation puts me in a good position to be able to build upon. I don't have to, start to learn some of the basics of government. I can actually hit the ground running. So
that's great. That's great. I oftentimes wonder, people that don't have your experience, people that haven't already had a couple of years of experience in local government, how sometimes that might just be daunting. So,
yeah, there's a few people. Actually, the other 5 candidates in my race. I
was going to ask you how many you're expecting to be in the primary with you and all that kind of stuff. So please, yeah.
Yeah, there's 5 other people in the primary. None of them have been elected before or had any kind of governmental experience. So they're all kind of vying to be elected for the first time on the state level. A couple of people are from the area, and a couple of people just moved into the area just to run for office. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Would those all be Democrats vying for a nomination in a primary, or is that a mixture of Republicans and Democrats that are looking at it?
This will be all the Democratic primary, 6 candidates total.
Wow. It's a crowded field.
Crowded field. It's kind of 2 front runners, myself and the person that Representative Peterson is supporting. So we're kind of the 2 front runners in this race.
Good. You know, Ypsilanti has led the way in a lot of different ways, including, we just talked about the wonderful park, the wonderful event that happened last year at the park, which certainly opened the door for a lot of
Canna Jam
this year. Canna Jam. So, I mean, Ypsilanti, the city itself, and Ypsilanti, the township, haven't always shared the same kind of optimism towards cannabis, though, right?
That's true. Ypsi City has been a lot more liberal and a lot more open to a lot of different things. So the township has been historically more conservative.
It went away from it a lot sooner, but the city of Ypsilanti joined Ann Arbor early on with like the $5 ticket for the possession law and stuff like that. So that's true. I was mentioning that there's kind of like, I know the supervisor is a woman, but there's kind of been like this old boys network type thing that's gone on in that area for a while, and really slowing this issue down.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So, other than the cannabis issue, what other issues do you look forward to championing once you receive the representative's position?
Yeah, so in Ypsilanti, housing seems to be a really big issue right now around affordable housing. For so long, we've heard people kind of getting pushed out of Ann Arbor into Ypsilanti. But over the last 5-7 years here, people are starting to get pushed out of Ypsilanti now. And so trying to really get some developers in to tackle affordable housing, I think, is important. And then when you start talking about education from K through 12 and even into our post-secondary, the education system kind of needs to be overhauled a little bit. Ypsi community schools, they need a little more support. So right now, the formula is not as equitable as it can be. And these are things that we can change on the state level that need to be addressed. And then, as you know, in the last 24 hours, we've heard things around Roe v. Wade. And so this is going to probably be kicked down to the state level in all 50 states. So on day one, I'm going to have to address this issue. I am pro-choice. I think that women should be able to choose what they do with their bodies. And so that'll be something pushing on day one. I'm also a labor guy. I'm UAW. So there's also some, right to work. I'd like to try to tackle that, make sure we get our minimum wage up higher than what it's at, more of a livable wage. So a lot of different issues that need to be addressed. Environmental, making sure that when corporations and companies pollute, that they pay for that. Polluters should pay. And I think our Senator Jeff Irwin has some legislation right now in the pipeline for that. So that'll be something I'm pushing as well from the state house side. So
fantastic. Wow. That certainly is an ambitious slate. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with us about those particular issues. I'm in support of everything you just said. So.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Jimmie, I wanted to bring up, my name is Latrisha Matson. Hi, I'm from the Michigan Weedsters. I met you at the Capitol, or excuse me, I met you at Hash Bash, but very briefly because you were famous. So you had mentioned that you work for the union and whatnot too. Are you aware of what the conditions are right now as far as it goes for the high turnover rate in a lot of, some of the major grows and whatnot in our state?
You said the turnover rate for major?
Yeah, there's just a lot of turnover rate as far as that goes. I've been seeing a lot of places, especially I think it was Muskegon, actually just unionized, and I think there's a couple other companies that did too. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not aware of the of that part, but you know, trying to. So obviously, I'm pro labor and you know, pro worker. So the issue of a high turnover, I would start asking questions on why it's a high turnover, and then how we can, you know, obviously there's something going on internally there that.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot, actually. And I just wanted to bring it to light, give you some insight on, you know, what I'm seeing. I've been working with a couple of different or associations and whatnot on that particular topic. And it's just the promise of you know, a long-term position with all these different perks to it, and then you're out the door the next day. And it's very similar, especially coming from a union town. I'm from Flint, Michigan. Both my dad and my grandfather were in union sit-down strikes, things of that nature. So you notice these things and you were raised around it, you know. And I was just curious. And if you don't know, then you should look. And it's just as easy as looking at some of the reviews in Indeed or Glassdoor. You can go to one place and see 240 responses over 3 months of in and out door service with people that are going to these places. So maybe somebody can look into.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that on my radar.
Cool.
Hey, Jimmie, do you know the position how UAW views cannabis patients? If there's policies for or against, or where they are with that?
I know that in 2018, they took no stance, and they're still taking no stance to this day on anything related to cannabis.
And
Melissa, I think that's the reason why, is because the membership itself is so kind of divided, and so the upper leadership has not taken a position on it.
Okay.
If I was to put a pulse on it, though, as far as the membership itself, I would say a lot of our membership is probably more pro-cannabis. You know,
it's probably similar to politics at large. You know, where the leadership has, you know, ways to go before they're caught up with the masses. So Melissa brings up, we were talking about other issues, you know, as we were continuing on this conversation aside from cannabis, and she brings up that, I'll put it back up there. Fines for polluters need to be effective enough to make them stop. All too often it's cheaper for them to pay the fines than to clean up their mess. There could be legislation that you look at while you're a state house rep that might affect stuff like that. And
yeah, and even talking about, I mean, we talk about sanctions all the time with the foreign countries, right? So, you know, trying to be more strict than just a fine probably would make them back up from actually polluting.
Here in Flint, we've had kind of a rash of large housing complexes being owned by companies out of state who just stop maintaining and taking care of them. They collect rent until they just fall apart, and then they get condemned, and then all of a sudden the city is forced to help relocate all these people who are now in a building that's condemned because the Floridians who own the particular property have just completely lost interest in taking care of it. What can we do you think, on a state level in order to hold landlords more responsible for the upkeep and maintenance, especially in buildings that service distressed communities like the elderly?
Yeah, I know that in Ypsi Township, we've got certain ordinances in place that we make. Not only are we doing inspections on those rentals, but they have to have a certain standard. They can't just let them, because we get residents all the time that call and they say, you know, my landlord's not doing this and this. And we kind of walk through, well, I know I walk some of our residents through how to get it all on record, on paper. And then we turn it over to our attorneys to enforce the ordinance to make landlords just take care of their properties, you know, the blight and the kind of neighborhood stabilization.
Right. Yeah. Happy to take the money when the first of the month comes around, but not always so happy to provide service when the water stops running for like 2 weeks. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Or a roof that they don't want to replace, and now you got leaks coming into certain apartments, and we've had to deal with all that. And I think that if we could put some kind of blanket on the state level, then that covers, a lot more territory, a lot more municipalities instead of just the one that I come from now.
Well, I hate to think of blight as a jobs program, but what we do know is that we need more inspectors. We need more people to be able to go out and identify blighted properties and identify properties that are worth saving and capable of being saved before they slide into blight status. So when it comes down to it, there's several places I think we should be expanding government and including that particular area.
Yep. Yeah, I think he mellowed out. Somebody
get this spammer out of here.
Yeah.
So
somebody's shaking it up a little bit. We bring up some issues that, of course, can be its own discussion, and we don't. I didn't really want to display, that back and forth too much on there. But safe work conditions and stuff like that. Because he brought up his position, and obviously Jimmie brought up your position with the union and stuff like that. So we had a little abortion discussion and a little union discussion that broke out. There's kind of hot topics for a lot of people, obviously. So.
Oh yeah.
But Jen brought up, of course, during the midst of this that tiny housing communities can be helpful for those.
That's true.
Like tiny dog communities, tiny housing communities. But no, Sherman's wonderful. Tiny communities. We just talked a little bit earlier in the program about hempcrete and the possibility of doing 3D printing houses. We've seen living examples on YouTube of machines which are capable of doing this. All they really need is an on-site source of concrete, and they can just run 24/7, other than maintenance and such. What a fantastic solution to some of these particular things. And Jimmie, really all we're talking about here is space needed, right? Just some space.
Right. And see, that's the kind of ideas we need to start really having that conversation around, instead of just thinking everything has to be how it always has been. That's kind of one of my frustrations in government, is that some folks in government, some politicians, they feel like, well, this is how we've always done it, but we need to kind of expand our horizons and be more open-minded of different subject matter. So,
right. Yeah. The solutions to tomorrow's problems are probably not found in yesterday's technology.
Exactly. Yep.
That was good, right? All right. Let's just whip that out.
I might have to steal that, Rick.
You're allowed. You're allowed. Consider that a contribution to the campaign. Yeah. But fact of the matter is, what we're really looking at is 2022 has some unique issues. Even climate change affects us now as well, too. We have hotter summers. We have less water. We're going to have some problems similar to what they have in areas which traditionally haven't been subject to so much of climate problems.
Richard points something out that's being discussed a lot. Now, you've been discussing this a lot, Rick. He says remediation is in that O3 to kill mold. That is one thing. That's done. That's the ozonator, and there's other things that get done too. And some people do show up and argue that it doesn't affect anything, doesn't hurt anything. Well, people say that all the time. That there's this machine called the Willow machine. The representatives of the manufacturer showed up to say, hey, if we're going to say anything on there about it, let's say that this great thing happened to it, because of what there's so
remediated weed.
Yeah. So the point, but the point is that and you're kind of exemplifying it right now, Adam. The point is that regardless of what anybody says, or regardless, even if you believe that, consumers want to know whether or not it happened.
I agree. I agree with that, and I'd be more than happy to, point out that something was remediated. I would think that if I was selling weed and I was selling a remediated product and it was in the marketplace, that I would be happy to let everybody know that's what they were buying. I mean, if you're willing to buy it, you're willing to buy it.
And if it really doesn't do anything for it, then then what's
I'll say this question, because you guys are all the growers and amazing people. So there's a bill that just came out about transporting plant waste from a big grow to a dump site. I guess apparently they're going to have a license for that, for a lot of their plant matter. The sticks and stones have to go to a dump site. Why would they have to do that? I'm just saying, like in remediation, when you guys are talking about remediation, I mean, can it be like
somebody's going to make some money off of that. Somebody's going to have
that's
where it goes, and
creating a special license
truck to go pick it up.
And they're allowed. The transport company is allowed to take it or product away, but it's not allowed to take it to the wayside.
So we got a $2 billion industry right now that exists without that program and does just fine without that program. Why would we need to insert that program at this point? It just doesn't make sense.
Extra layer of costs and hassle, and somebody's trying to set somebody else up to make a couple extra bucks off them.
Right.
Well, you did read that big story that was involved with Eric Nisbet, the Republican from Lawton.
Give an overview, please, so people know.
He received $30,000 in contributions last spring from 3 members of the Balkma family of Southwest Michigan, whose businesses include the Old Hills Sanitary Landfill in Barron County and Bestway Disposal, a Kalamazoo-based waste hauling service that operates across the Midwest. It's talking about how there's been a bill for quite some time, for like the last 10 years, about what's going on with our recycling issue, and it's very, very bad issue. My dad works, or my brothers and my family are all landfill people for a long, long time. And so this is something that they've been trying to pass for quite some time. I guess he was involved. He got a lot of donations from it. And this is particularly, I believe, the contract that are trying to actually give that bill, which was 4454.
I saw something like that in the Sunday's Flint Journal, actually.
And Spartan's bringing up how it could be based upon, built upon the fact that you have to make sure that whatever material there is so damaged that it can't be used for anything.
That's the current standard, though. People mix it with kitty litter. They mix it with water. They do all kinds of different things.
Now, I can see, like, if you want to use, like, there's still a bunch of fiber there and all that kind of stuff. We talked about, like, stuff you could do,
renewable.
To be able to gather it, to use it for that, it makes sense. But just take it and have a special dump. You have to take up more space. That special dump should be a great place to grow on.
Something they're going to try to apply to everybody else after that, I'm assuming.
Can you imagine the volume, the size of truck that you'd have to have?
You don't create infrastructure not to try to take more advantage of it later on. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
The truck size would have to be huge from some of these giant cultivation facilities where you got 700,000 square feet under cultivation. But then also you would be penalized by the distance that you were from the dump, because if you happen to just by the misfortune of being located someplace far away from where they established this dump, that could be the difference between making or breaking the success of your company, the cost of getting rid of your waste.
Yeah,
that's really, to change the rules this stage of the game really seems questionable. I'm curious now. Yeah, Mark Shanaquat says just amend it back into the dirt and it'll grow back later. This is a highly compostable subject. It really is.
Yeah, and so I guess Jimmie, this is there's like big money forces out there. Just probably a lot of issues where people are trying to siphon off. I mean, you're in the automotive,
right
industry. That's very seasoned, and it's all about saving a nickel here and there and siphoning money off here. You know how that system works, and it's just kind of similar, I guess. And we can't kind of think this is a new industry, and we should be shaping it differently and not succumb to a lot of these, standard ways where. Those who position themselves, in the right way or whatever, get to siphon off, the abuses, the corruption, there's a lot of that going on. Big money interests trying to, position themselves. That's what we're talking about. The new effort in the Senate with the big money industry association and stuff like that.
Right.
So there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's bizarre. It's crazy.
So we hope there's, all the redrawing of these districts and new opportunities and that kind of stuff that we can improve upon the composition of lawmakers that we are working with now. I mean, no offense to everybody out there, some great ones, but man, there's room for improvement, and we need people who think about stuff, man. I mean, who aren't just transactional or just go, yeah, that group wants it, okay, I'm going to do it,
Well, we just had Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer talking about how it's incumbent upon the states to send a different composition of lawmakers to the Senate if we want to protect things like Roe versus Wade, if we want to retain the character of America as we know it, and the improvements that we've already won, especially in social justice. Same thing with our state representatives as well. We have to improve the quality of the people that we're sending to make decisions on our behalf in a representative government. I'm proud, Jimmie. I think you'd be a great House representative. Much success to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hey, man, is there anything else you want to make sure people know or let people know where they might be able to, if they need to get into further contact or if they want to help out?
Yeah. So if you want to look at my campaign website, it's JimmieWilsonJr.com, which is, I think you can see my name spelled right there, JIMMIE, WilsonJr.com. Or you can feel free to call, text 734-999-0049. I'm very transparent, and I'll have a conversation with anybody. We may not always agree, but I will have that conversation and try to be open-minded on what your side of things. So,
you say JimmieWilsonJr.com?
Yes, sir.
All right, just help out. These are the kind of people who are getting. Just to let you know, Latrisha, who's been part of this conversation with us today, happens to also be campaign manager for another candidate for the 68th district there. Amy Carter, she was also at Hash Bash, and you perhaps cross paths there. And
Flint area.
Yep.
Yeah, right outside of Flint and Burton, Grand Blanc, Davison, Atlas, and Groveland.
Okay, excellent.
I'll have to call you and talk about some things.
And then, of course, if some folks are in the Ypsilanti area, May 20th, I have a little fundraiser going on May 20th. And come to at 734 Brewery, Depot Town, Ypsilanti. Or, of course, the website has a little link where you can hit that little contribute button, donate.
Yeah, please do that. And then this fundraiser, it's in Depot Town, but didn't hear where it was.
734 Brewery.
Okay, that's the name of the location. It's a brewery.
Yes.
And Depot Town. Okay, and
734 is the area code, right? Yeah.
Yep. May 20th. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, 6:30 to 8.
We'll let people know about that again.
We'll try to make it.
Yeah.
Try to get there.
Thank you for joining us on Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Jimmie. It's been great talking with you today.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, man. We'll have you back on too, and hopefully, for sure, right after you win the primary.
Excellent. And then that's when the real work starts, So.
Exactly.
That's right.
You have our support for sure. Thank you very much, man.
All right. Thanks for having me. Take care.
And
I don't want to get too. He's a great guy. Go ahead.
Some of these local ordinances, I think this kind of stuff's been brought up, if I'm not mistaken, what Jen is putting up here right now. Townships are trying to make patients hire a DEA disposal carrier service. And so there's some of the infrastructure, right there.
Now,
the whole reason that I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
It just drives me crazy that someone would think that the stalks and stems and root balls that were discarded from some cannabis cultivation center, who, by the way, their specific goal is to make sure that no usable cannabis is left in the trash bin, right? So that unproductive stuff, someone would try and take that and then melt it down, rend it down into some kind of oil or something.
Is it toxic?
It just seems so silly to even consider that as a legitimate cause of concern.
Well, this description where an infrastructure gets started and then there's obvious opportunities to build on it is, gets used a lot. And just for historical purposes, during the cannabis journey, the whole reason that transportation was in the MMFLA was the beginning of trying to create an infrastructure for the tiered system similar to alcohol. Yeah. So eventually, go ahead.
They wanted the plan. They thought that it was going to be very important for secure transport because they wanted to collect a tax on the cultivator. So they would, instead of taxing at the point of purchase as we do right now, they wanted to make a tax. And they envisioned that because there was no banking services, these cultivators, these guys who don't really do any retail sales at all, would be having these fat stacks of greenbacks that would be putting into these trucks to carry back to the banks because they couldn't do it themselves. And therefore, secure transport was born because they needed some way to haul the tax revenue from the cultivators to the bank. Well, we convinced them after some big effort that that was not the right way to do taxation. The taxation takes place traditionally at the retail environment, and then you handle it through the government channels. You don't have to have all of this extra stuff. So, I mean, transport was sort of left over, Jamie, after that sort of concept was blown out of the water.
Yeah, so the approach here in part was to make it very restrictive to who could even be one of these transports, and you'd be down to like, based on all the parameters, you know, I forgot what the number
like
was.
3 companies, wasn't there?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe 6, but something like that.
They were all the major players in that industry already.
In tobacco and in alcohol, I think that those are like the ones that had that kind of capital, that kind of experience.
Federal had already have a federal tax certification in order to be able to do this, and the only people that have that are the tobacco guys. And
so then part of the deal would be they would have, you know, their base or these structures that could be humidity controlled, and instead of like just coming to get what an order is from point A and take it to point B as the system starts out, they ultimately would say, look, I'll just take everything right now and I'll bring it back and we'll store it, you know, and when it's needed, we'll just have it. We don't have to make this extra stop and then take it to the distribution point. Like the tier system in alcohol, ultimately, everything has to go to one of these distributors first, and then it gets taken to the distribution point. You can't have a brewery and then just make sure you get some over to the stores that are in the area. You know, it has to go to this other point first and then out to the stores. And that's what they were trying to do and create these points by that, you know. That was the plan, or as we, you know, came to believe anyway over time. And that's what a lot of the conversation was. And it makes sense. And then transportation stayed on with the MRTMA so that it could just piggyback on that system and have less of an issue with transition and stuff. Although that's something I didn't really care for. No, well, that's the people you're talking about being involved in this is the Chelanis of the world, Tom Chelani and his crew, the whole Bell Tire family, too, which became Loom. Those are the people that were really pushing for some of these exclusive business opportunities that would not be opened out to anybody else because you'd have to have certain certifications or certain monetary requirements to get into it that only the exclusive could play. So some of the reasons that we don't like some of the people that we don't like have very valid reasons back in our history before they changed, you know, what they were doing and decided to capitalize on what we gave them and the program that we had. And Trish just dusted us. I couldn't blame her. I was going off. I was just kind of rambling there, so I would leave if that was happening. Sure. So she knows going to put a lot of pressure on her for words of wisdom at the end to solve a lot of problems. Wow. And, I don't think she was up for it this time around, one of these times. No. But I think if we spent a lot of time talking about some of the negatives going on with the community itself, just to circle back to some of the positives, look at all the wonderful events that are going on this year. You know, the melding of the regulated market and the traditional legacy market here in Michigan has really started to take hold, and it doesn't seem as if there's any negative consequence from it. We see regulated market companies participating in things that were traditionally legacy market events, and you know, there's a really valid reason to do that. Brand recognition, appeal to an audience that doesn't normally come into your store. Lots of reasons you'd want to do that. And it's a good time so far. Right on. Yeah. Well, anyway, man, I mean, just to recap some of our discussion today, I guess I want to remind people to still try to have the conversation, or send the email or make the call, and let your state senator to know that you oppose 5512 and that you're, you know, aware of discussion of some possible anti-caregiver or new legislation that may reduce caregiver rights that's being discussed, and just oppose all of that. And, you know, sooner we get started, the better. And I know many people have already kind of like begun this process, but we're going to have to do something probably similar to what we did before. Lobby days, maybe even a couple of them. Yeah. And just have to be in touch with each other and work together on some of this stuff.
Yeah. The work doesn't end. It's a continuous fight in order to protect what we've got and you know, scrape for any new rights that we might be able to scramble out of things, like Jaden's law. If we were able to make that happen, that would be wonderful.
And again, another reason to have a better composition of lawmakers next session. Things like Jaden's law, the decriminalization, or the delist bill, state deschedule bill. Lots of things that could use some more support and more momentum than they have now under the current composition of lawmakers. And it's good that they're out there now. People can talk about them and be familiar with them and, you know, try to reason through some stuff. I mean, it's how you can arrive at not wanting kids to take their medicine. I mean, you have to be one of the people that just want to openly admit that you don't believe in any of this stuff, you know, and yeah, we can remove tax on patients. Representative Johnson actually introduced a bill. It didn't go anywhere, but it did have that intent.
Medical marijuana patients in Michigan are already exempt from the 10% excise tax that is charged to adult use patients, but they are still subject to a 6% sales tax, similar to the way that small businesses evade the sales tax.
No, there's no medicine, no other medicine in Michigan that tax.
Right? Shouldn't be able to.
So to tax medical.
So, but over the counter medicine though.
Right, over the counter medicine, but nothing, no prescription medicine.
Right. Yep. So there's the difference between prescription level and recommendation level, which is what medical marijuana enjoys. But the fact, I think, as most of us agree, that if you're sick enough to have a medical marijuana card, you probably shouldn't have to pay tax on that, regardless of what justification's used.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. No, lots of ways that we can work to improve things too. We need to have the government take a firm stand on ending drug testing in the workplace environment, and they need to make that stand by stopping it on their own level. We should not have a system in Michigan where $2 billion worth of cannabis is being sold, but anybody that buys it might be ineligible for some kind of a job because there's still a P-test involved. That's ridiculous. We talk about a labor shortage or a worker shortage here in the United States of America right now. Michigan business owners are screaming bloody murder because they can't fill their employee lists with qualified people. You need to start working with employees or with potential employees and do what they feel is important to them. It's more than just compensation. Take away the drug test. Let us be who we are. So,
fuck the drug tests.
Anatomically, I'm just not sure how that works.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to stop thinking about it right now, actually. Thank you.
I'm just wondering what you think about when you think about the drug test versus a little panel thing, or
no, I was thinking more like the swab that they do inside your cheek and such. Yeah. Or of course the snipping of the hair, right?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Well, I'm sure they could take some off your face.
Man, watch a good show just totally degrade. At least it's in the moments.
Last couple minutes. That is an awesome shirt that you have on there, Adam. I know it's from the Cashmere Clouds event.
Weekend they hooked me up with the Cashmere Clouds shirt, and they gave me a hoodie that they had made for me. So that was kind of cool. They took pretty good care of me out there. I'll be going to their next event for sure.
That looks to me an awful lot like one of those old bubblegum packages that we used to get. Okay. So colorful. That's great.
Let me tell you something. It was like a bubblegum weekend, dude.
I know a lot of people went out there. Sunshine Daisy, who was on our comments earlier today, was out there as well too. And I saw a lot of pictures from there, and it seemed like that was a pretty well attended event. So.
Trish and Amy were there.
Mm-hmm.
So I like, by the way, just while I'm thinking about it, and we're just to wrap up, I like Trisha's, the expanded research that she's been doing on a lot of stuff and that she's, shares with us during these conversations on here. So that's much appreciated. Obviously we had Jimmie Wilson on. That was a pretty cool conversation. And that is the type of guy I like to support. Moving into a higher level decision-making capacity. I like the way he thinks issues through. You might not always agree with somebody, but if there was a process that went into that decision, as opposed to just being transactional or just taking the advice of some group that looked at it, I really can't stand that. That's the difference between good law and bad law passing quite often. How well you can, get something past people like that. They're well intended, but they're not looking into it deep enough. I think he likes to look into issues before he makes a decision on it.
Yeah.
So, Adam, anything you want to add?
Not really. I mean, people obviously need to get in contact with their state senator, let them know that we're paying attention. And, I mean, the reality is that they have a lot to learn on some of this stuff because it's all very important. And, we obviously have a lot to teach. So I think it's time to rev up the engines.
Right. Right on. I was going to mention earlier real quick that we're talking about what to do with the cannabis waste, and on Medical Mondays last night was a guy who takes all that stuff and feeds it to pigs, feeds it to hogs, and then they process it and they put it through the regular.
These special hogs too. These Hungarian.
So they're supposed to be really like aggressive normally, but they eat all this cannabis and they're pretty mellow, I guess. But that's not that's a scenario I've been around and I didn't really respond to it all that.
Well, it was also the aspect of the organic farming using these pigs too. And
they use their compost and all that,
right. And they stampede the farmland that's underneath his greenhouses, and it's pretty.
It was an interesting conversation. It just kind of reminded me of that, and I meant to say that before we were talking about hauling that shit off to a special dump and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But anyway, if you don't mind wrapping us up, Rick, just a couple minutes over, but not bad.
Well, first of all, let's thank Jimmie for coming on today, and of course, Latrisha's always great when she comes in and she contributes. We have a lot of work to do, but also look at all the wonderful people that are lining up in order to take public office and work on our behalf. Amy Carter, Jimmie, so many other people that are taking offices or at least seeking offices on a statewide level or a local level too. We have allies. We have people that are on our side. We will prevail. That's my message for today. We will prevail. And you can watch me Friday on Green Rush Live from 4 to 6, by the way. I'll just throw in a shameless plug. Athletes in Cannabis show, I will have Darren McCarty on as well.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad I didn't cut it off that soon. That was purely by accident, but at least you were able to say that. All right. Jazz Cabbage Cafe, everybody. Thanks, everyone who was on today. And you guys, we'll see you next week. Jazz Cabbage.